Good morning, everyone who is joining us today. My name is Hannah Sanford Keller, and I'm a staff member at the University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities at Oregon Health and Science University. And we're so excited to have you joining us for our webinar series, the first part of our three-part webinar series this morning. We're going to go ahead and get started with just some housekeeping items, and then we'll get started with our content for the morning. So the required disclosure information, none of the planning committee members or speakers have anything to disclose. And as a reminder, everyone has been automatically muted this morning. We're asking that everyone mutes their audio and their video and instead uses the chat function for any questions or discussion. I will read the questions aloud to our presenters, Carrie and Kim, as we go through our webinar today. We will also have some time at the end for questions. In addition, just a reminder, this webinar is being recorded. The recorded version will be available on the UCED website by next week. In addition, we are offering continuing professional development and continuing medical education credits for this webinar, as well as Oregon speech pathology continuing education credits for this live webinar. And we'll have an evaluation at the end and a link for participants to complete in order to get those CEU and CME credits. I'd like to just start this morning by introducing our two webinar presenters, Kim Elliott and Carrie Luce. So Kim Elliott received a Bachelor's of Fine Art from York University in Toronto and completed her graduate degree in speech pathology from Portland State University. She worked on the assistive technology team at Randall Children's Hospital and has worked with adults at Oregon Health and Science University, serving clients with ALS, Parkinson's, stroke, neurodegenerative diseases, and developmental disabilities. Along with two colleagues, she began the Assistive Technology Northwest Clinic, a private practice where she focused on developing communication supports for children and adults with complex communication needs. She is now co-director of the Community Vision AT Lab in Southeast Portland. She teaches the graduate AAC course as an adjunct faculty member at Portland State University and is also trained as a teacher of danceability, a dance and movement approach that includes people of all abilities. We are also excited to welcome Carrie Luce. Carrie graduated from the Medical University of South Carolina with a master's in occupational therapy. She worked in an interdisciplinary setting, learning alongside physical therapy and speech pathology students. She is a certified assistive technology professional, and she specializes in communication access, seating and mobility, and sensory integration. Her passion is working with and learning from people with complex communication, mobility, and medical needs. She worked for almost 10 years at the Children's Hospital at Legacy Emanuel in Portland, Oregon, and she has served children and adults through her private practice at Assistive Technology Northwest, in addition to consulting at the Providence Neurodevelopmental Center for Children and the Child Center. She teaches AT courses at Pacific University and guest lectures at Portland State University, and is now co-directing the AT Lab at Community Vision. So we are so excited to have both of them with us today. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing our slides, and I'm going to hand it over to Carrie. All right, Carrie, if you want to go ahead and share your slides with us. Here we go. And I think you might still be muted, so go ahead and unmute your microphone as well.
There we go, we've got that. Just mute, not the video, right?
Yep, and we can hear you.
There we go, excellent. Well, thank you, Hannah, for the introduction and making this possible today. I'm so excited to have everyone here virtually and keeping our AAC community connected. So just to clarify, today will just be me, since we're focusing on access. And then in April and in March, we'll have Kim and myself together looking at all three parts of augmentative communication. But today we're just focusing on the access piece. So we will get started. Today our objectives are learning about the human technology interface, which is essentially what access is, and we're going to talk about that. Really finding out what we mean by visual motor access to augmentative and alternative communication. Hopefully by the end, everyone can identify at least one alternative access method for AAC, and then really understanding the reason for learning alternative access in the context of play and errorless activities. And so we'll see some examples today. And then actually, I'm going to go ahead and do my video because then you can see my face up in the corner, correct? Can you see me up in the corner?
Not yet. Should be able to. Let's see.
Yes.
Oh, yep, we can see.
There we go. Okay, great. It's nice to at least put a face to the voice. Yeah, so next time we'll be looking at our three-part approach to augmentative and communication for folks with complex communication needs. The three-part approach is participation, access, and language. But today we're just going to be focusing on access and those pieces of communication. So let's jump right in. So what do we mean by AAC access? It's really how someone interacts with and uses a communication system. So it could be using their finger, it could be using their eyes, it could be using switches, it could be a light tech system or a high tech system. So it's really how does that person utilize that system? So that's what we'll be looking at today. So as I mentioned, the human interface technology, access is really what is that piece that's in between the person and whatever technology they'll be using. It could be a communication device, it could be a TV, it could be a game, a lamp, whatever that technology is, the interface in between is that access piece. So that's what we'll be looking at today, specifically for AAC. So for successful communication, we really want to make access as easy as possible and helping someone remove barriers who might have challenges with their motor skills, maybe some auditory processing or listening. There might be some difficulties with vision or other sensory regulation. So we're really looking to make access as easy as possible in AAC. So where do we start? With getting our body ready. So an example here, this little guy really benefits from some heavy work before he sits down to engage with any tools. Here he's doing some handstands and push-ups. That's not always possible, particularly in a classroom setting. So thinking about other ways maybe for a child to get heavy work if that helps them be organized. So for this little guy in school, he wears in the morning a little backpack that's got a little weight to it, and that helps him get feel grounded before he enters his classroom. And so here he is on the right. His body is ready to work. You can see he's got his oral sensory chew tool, he's got his glasses on, his devices are up at a bit of an angle, and he's ready to go and engage with his technology. So thinking about the body from a sensory standpoint, but also from a positioning standpoint. So for this young gal here, she's got her eye gaze device out on the desk in front of her. She has Rett syndrome and tends to sit with a kyphotic posture. So we didn't have anything fancy. We just had a little beanbag cushion, very thin beanbag cushion that we placed under her sits bones to help her pelvis kind of tilt forward. And we've got a yoga block behind her back, just again to help her sit up a little bit. So really thinking about how the seated body affects our ability to use our eyes and hands together, and thinking about that pelvic positioning. So working with maybe an OT or a physical therapist in looking at the body and getting positioning. So for this young lady here, she didn't want to sit. And so standing was her preferred position to explore her new light tech communication book. So here she had, her and her mom and her school team had all worked together. We put this communication book together for her, and she was ready to check it out, but she didn't want to sit, and that was just fine. So for her, standing was a stable position. She liked to lean against the table and could kind of lean forward. And that's how she kind of flipped through her book and got kind of used to it. And once she was more familiar with it over time, you can see over on the left here, she's sitting using her book. And the picture on the left is actually a newer version of her book a couple months later that had more pages, and it was in a notebook. So she could sit and flip through it. But in the beginning, she wanted to stand, and that was just fine. Also thinking about vision um, and visual convergence. And so how does our position affect our vision? So the gentleman on the left over here is potentially in some hairy traffic. And we know that when we get stressed or we're studying or need to really focus on something, we tend to lean in. And one reason we do that is it closes our visual field a bit, and gravity actually helps pull our eyes together, and we have better visual convergence in that leaning forward position. Same with the little girl in the middle. She's doing a puzzle, leaning forward, and that's a good position for visual convergence. For this little guy over here on the right, his vision specialist let us know that his inferior vision, so looking down, those muscles didn't work well for him. So it was very hard for him to look down. So we brought visual information, a book, his communication system up more in a vertical plane for him. And that was an easier way for him to use his vision. So thinking about the body, thinking about vision, um, and just getting ourselves ready to interact with communication tools. So for this young guy over here on the left, that's Kim there, and she's holding up some visual symbols slightly to the right. It turns out that his right visual field was stronger, and she's got them in a horizontal plane. And then here I am over on the right side holding some symbols up in a vertical plane, just trying to figure out and working with his vision specialist, where is a good location to place these communication tools. And for him, it turned out that that vertical presentation and scanning vertically was a lot easier for him. And if anyone has any questions as we move along, feel free to type in your chat box. We will have time at the end for more in-depth questions and discussion. So a little side note here about dyspraxia, and more specifically, someone with severe dyspraxia. And what that is what we're talking about is motor planning and difficulties with motor planning and executing a cognitive intent. So someone might have an idea of what they want to do with their body. They might see an object and you can just tell they're staring at it and they really want to reach for it or touch it, but their body doesn't always cooperate. So really that's an indication of difficulties with motor planning. And it's just a little side note to note that that has no reflection on someone's cognitive ability. And so sometimes we can confuse motor output with cognitive ability. So just realizing that there could be a motor planning piece and it doesn't represent maybe what that person is thinking and what their cognitive abilities are. So it's better to assume that someone maybe, rather than they don't understand what an activity is, that maybe their body is not cooperating. So what we say is the least dangerous assumption is to assume that everyone has the potential to learn and understand, but sometimes bodies don't always cooperate. So things to look out for are watching someone's eye movements, subtle body movements, and signs of intent. And we say every move counts. And if you're familiar with Linda Burkhart, she is well known in the augmentative communication world, and she has a handout, and we've kind of adapted a handout into this one-page sheet, tips for someone with some severe dyspraxia. So we're happy to share that as well, and can post that. Maybe Hannah can post that for us. So looking at communication, there's a lot that goes on with communication, and we ourselves, when we communicate, we don't think about all these parts, but there's a lot that our body is doing and that our mind is doing during communication. So over on the right, the light yellow circles, those are things that our body is processing and doing during communication, but we don't always think about. So we're using our vision, we're listening, we're moving our bodies. You can see I'm leaning in, I'm speaking with my hands, and we're also in general, self-regulating our bodies. And over on the left side, the orange circles are what's going on in our mind, thinking about our social skills, our timing during a conversation, and what are those thoughts that we're having during a conversation. And so with access, we want to think about how can we make those yellow circles as easy as possible so someone doesn't have to be concentrating on what their body is doing, and they can focus more on the social and cognitive piece of communication. So we say for successful communication in the beginning for someone, it's really best, and again, we're talking about someone who has some access challenges, maybe a difficulties working their body. Um, in the beginning, it's best to keep our communication goals separate from our access goals. We can kind of combine those goals together at times, but in the beginning, keeping those goals separately. And we also have a handout on writing communication goals and access goals that we're happy to share for therapists and for families as well. So for access, where do we start? Starting with play-based and fun activities. So decreasing that cognitive load so someone isn't having to think about maybe complex language layered on top of what is my body supposed to do. So really for children, starting with play-based activities, the access as easy as possible in the beginning and is automatic, and really thinking about what are the visual, motor, and auditory components of what we're asking them to do. And it can take time for practice. It can take time and practice for accuracy to be good enough to not cause frustration. So again, starting with fun activities. And we'll look at some examples. But first,
it's kind of boring and such too.
Just a reminder, go ahead and mute your audio and your video if you're participating today so we don't get feedback for the rest of the group.
Nope. Click it to unmute.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll go over real quick, what are different access methods? So in general, direct access is when we directly use our finger to touch something, maybe a picture or a cell on a device. We might look directly with our eyes. Even a mouse is direct access because you're using your cursor to go to directly to the cell or item that you want. And a joystick can be used in the same way. And even speech recognition. So when we're telling the Echo, what we want and saying, turn on music, or talking to Siri, that we're telling them directly what we want. So anything else is considered indirect access. And in general, that's switch scanning. It also includes Morse code, and there's been a resurgence in Morse code lately for switch users. And so if anyone's interested in that, feel free to contact us and we can share. But today, indirect access will refer to switch scanning, and we'll look at that. Indirect alternative access is anything when we're not directly using our finger in the traditional sense. So it could be eye gaze, head mouse, joystick, or even modifications such as key guards, slant board. So we'll run through some examples. So for eye gaze, if you've seen an eye gaze device before, there's a module at the bottom of the device that has a camera in it, and it's looking at your eyes to determine where your pupils are looking. So in the beginning, if someone's trialing an eye gaze device, starting with those fun activities where there's not a lot of cognitive load. So for this young girl over here on the left, she's doing trials with a communication device, and we actually just have a board game out. So we've got Trouble over here on the right. There's some messages up on the screen, roll the dice, what's next, this is fun. And then on the left, she has an iPad with a dice app that she can swipe and roll the dice. So it's really a low cognitive load, but engaging and fun activity. There's software that's fun and game-based. So up at the top is Inclusive TLC. They've got software games. And then down at the bottom is Look to Learn, made by Smartbox, sold by Toby Dynavox. And I do have a picture up of fart clouds. And you heard that correctly. I said fart clouds. So the picture next to Look to Learn is actually a game where you look at one of the clouds and you can imagine what might happen. And for anyone that either has a child or works with kids, you can imagine that this is a really fun, popular activity. So it's a great way to start if that's an interest to someone, just with a fun activity like that, kind of an errorless activity. Whatever you select, something funny happens. So a head mouse can be mounted and attached to a communication device, and that's where you would wear a reflective dot on your forehead, a little sticker, and the camera can read where your sticker is. So basically you're using your head as a mouse. So for someone who has good head control, this can be a potential good access for them. And it is just, now able to work on an iPad. So if you have a connector cord, a lightning connector cord to the camera, you can do this on the iPad as well. And same with the joystick. So joysticks, as I mentioned, can be used like a mouse, and you can use the joystick to go to the selection that you would like. And if you know someone who has a powered wheelchair, today most of that technology can interface with a computer or a communication device. Definitely check with the wheelchair vendor. There might be a cable that you need and a piece of equipment that you might need. And this also, joysticks can also be used on the iPad as well now with an adapter. So as I mentioned, key guards can augment someone's communication access. There's different companies out there that sell them, but they can be custom cut to fit any communication software or app. There's different sizes and colors, and that can help someone with their finger pointing and getting into the hole that they would like to select. And thinking about angles and slant boards, for this gentleman on the left over here, we mocked up a corrugated plastic slant board for him and just put some non-skid material over it just to figure out what angle might work best for him. We also did order a key guard for him. He's got Proloco to go up on his iPad. So between a key guard and we eventually made a custom slant board for him, it made his finger access a lot easier. His was up at about a 45-degree angle, and this little guy over here on the right, with just a 20-degree angle, it made it a lot easier for him to attend to the communication app that he has up here on his iPad. He could use it flat, but didn't always notice it or gravitate to it as much. So with about a 20-degree angle, he's got a little handle on his case that you can flip down. It just brought it into his visual field and made it a little easier for him to attend to. So we'll look at a few other accessories. So thinking about the cases that devices come in, straps, how does someone walk around with them or maybe attached to a wheelchair. So the Quick Talker Freestyle communication, that's actually coded as a communication device, and you can order that through insurance, through AbleNet. It's an iPad, but it comes housed with this case that has a speaker built in and a handle. Go Now case is another system that has the built-in speakers. It's got a handle. So really thinking about what is the system going to be housed in. I haven't ordered the Safe and Sound Mobile myself, but I know parents who've ordered it and really like it. So someone's able to walk around hands-free with their device, but it's right there at the ready when they need it. And we've done a whole class on mounting communication devices. There's tons of options out there, stands to put devices in and iPads, and then different ways to mount switches. So there's a lot of options out there. So now we'll look at indirect access, which is essentially switch scanning. So there's two types of switch scanning, one switch and two switch. For one switch scanning, someone can set the computer or the device to automatic, and that would be when the computer will automatically move from one cell to the next, and you can set the timing. And then when somebody sees or hears the message they want, then they activate a switch and it will say it out loud and make the selection. The opposite kind of way is a step or dwell function, and that would be when you use your switch and you can move through your different choices and control that timing. And then when you hear or see the one you want, you release your hand, you don't touch your switch, and then after a certain period of time that you can set, maybe a half a second or a second or 2 seconds, the computer will realize that you're done scanning, you've made your choice, and then it will say it out loud. So in general, one switch scanning can be more challenging for someone because there's timing involved. So for children in general, we start with two switch scanning, and we've had many kids that we've worked with who start out with two switch scanning, and that at some point in time, it could even be when they're an adult, they might decide to switch to one switch scanning because their timing has improved. So for two switch scanning, you've got two switches, and one is your mover switch, so you're in control of moving through your choices and your timing. And then when you hear or see the one you want, you press a second switch, and that will make your selection and say it out loud. So we'll see a video in a moment so you can see what that looks like. But just a little side note about switches. There's tons of switches out there. There's mechanical switches that have a spring inside. So when you press the switch, there's some pressure you have to give to activate. There are electronic switches that don't require any pressure, but really you just move your hand really close in proximity to the switch, and that electronic sensor senses where you are and it will activate. There's a sip and puff switch where maybe someone with a spinal cord injury uses a straw where they breathe in and blow out. So there's tons of types of switches out there. So if someone is going to be scanning on a communication device, there's scan patterns that you can set up and ways that you can customize the way that someone might scan through. So an easy way to start, and again with children we usually start with a linear scan, and that's just one item at a time so they can just focus on those individual items. When someone gets a little more proficient, they may prefer to switch to group scanning, and that's where you might highlight a whole column or row at a time. So you might have row 1, row 2, row 3, and then if you know the item you want is in the row 3, you select that row, and then you can do a linear scan through to get to the one you want. So that tends to be a little bit more efficient over time. So we'll see a video here for this young guy, Andy. He's got a new software program on his device. He's quite proficient in 2-switch step scanning. He'd been doing that for years, but he's got a new language system on his communication device. It's a 15-cell pragmatic layout, and it's on linear, so it's gonna highlight one square at a time. And he's got a mover and a getter, 2 switches up here. I think his mover is on his right and his selector is on the left, but let's watch the video. And here he's just exploring his new system. He had a light tech version first, so he's fairly familiar with the system. And for him, these are mostly phrases that are on there, but he hasn't used it. This is the first time he's used it on the device. So he's just exploring his phrases. So we'll watch this video.
Should be food already.
Do something. I want to do something.
Yeah, so we're gonna walk, we're gonna drive. Anything else?
Go for a walk.
For sure. You'll eat, we'll go for a walk.
Do something. Tell a thing. I'll tell you what I think. Great. Awesome. Love it. I love it.
Oh.
Great. Awesome. Love it. I love it.
You love it.
Do something. I want to do something. Walk. Go for a walk.
Okay. You'll do it. We will definitely.
Okay, so his mover switch was actually on his left and his selector was on his right. So that gives you an example of 2-switch step scanning in a linear pattern. And just so everyone knows, if you're not familiar, on an iPad, you can also switch scan and you just need an interface. Here we have the AbleNet hook circled. There's different interfaces out there for the iPad. So I'll also mention that if someone either doesn't have a device yet, or maybe their device is broken or not available, you can also scan using 2 switches with a partner in a light tech way. So here, this little guy does not have a communication device, but he has an auditory scanning book that he is quite familiar with that has lots of phrases in it. And so he can scan through this book with a partner using a yes and a no switch. And so here's Kim holding up a yes and no switch for him. And she's got the no switch on one side of his head, so he can learn to shake his head for no. And that's the goal over time. We might not need these switches and he could just shake his head for no, but right now he needs a cue with a switch there. And she's got a yes switch under his chin where he can start to practice this motion for yes, for nodding his head. So we'll watch as he scans through his book with Kim. And essentially Kim is acting as a communication device.
School choices are swing, rocking chair, read a book, sing a song, iPad, play, watch a video, or something else. swing, no, rocking chair, no, read a book, yes.
That's a great idea.
So we'll figure.
So you can see he's really starting to get those head movements down, and that could be a very efficient way for him to communicate, particularly if he's not in a wheelchair and doesn't have a device available, just learning those head movements. So you can scan using light tech, high tech with a device.
School choice.
Here's another example of a light tech way to use scanning. This little guy here, Weston, he's got his twin brother next to him and his mom is recording. He has a communication device, but for whatever reason, it's after school, he could be tired, maybe his switches aren't working. He has decided not to use his head switches, and that his brother and his mother are going to help him partner assist scan on his device using his verbal yes and no. So he has a verbal yes and no. So let's watch Weston on his device, see what he has to say.
Question. Do you have something to say?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Okay, chat words.
Is it chat words? Greetings or manners?
Yeah.
Greetings or manners?
No.
No. Chat words?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back.
No, I put on chat words.
Oh. Okay, is it in this row?
Yeah.
Me, you, uh-oh?
No.
No. Is it in this row? Hurry up, wait a minute, stop?
Yeah.
Yeah? Hurry up? Yeah?
Hurry up.
Is it back in chat words?
Are you telling me to hurry up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it took mom a second to figure out that he's saying, hurry up, let's be done with this videoing. And so you can see that mom was helping him do a group scan, and they were doing a column scan. So he picked which column he wanted and then which message he wanted. And again, feel free to chime into the chat window if you have any questions about anything you see here. I know we're going kind of fast. We have a lot to cover, and I want to make sure we have time for discussion at the end, but feel free to type in the chat window if you have any questions. There we go. Okay, so for scanning, you can also scan using no technology. So for this young guy here, he has a communication device with switches. He's also used the head switches before for yes and no, but now he's gotten so proficient at that he doesn't need any switches at all. And so when he's out and about with his mom in the community or on a field trip and they don't have any technology with them, someone can actually hold their hands next to his head. So one side is for yes and one side is for no. And he can scan through his communication book, or even, you know, if there's a category that's not in there, he can scan through a list of options pretty quickly just by someone holding up their hands on either side of his head. And I have a little yellow circle on the left highlighting that on his back canes on his wheelchair, we have a little yes and a little no, just to remind caregivers and teachers and parents which side is yes and which side is no for him, since we can often forget. So some tips on learning alternative access. As we mentioned before, kind of separating those high demand cognitive, that cognitive load and communication from that access piece in the beginning. Just thinking about allocating our resources, how much we're asking somebody to do all at once. And you'll see next month and the month after how we kind of bring all those pieces together. But in the beginning, sometimes it's good to pull those pieces apart, particularly for access. Just making it fun and errorless in the beginning, which really allows for motor learning and helps someone become more automatic in their access. Even a powered wheelchair is a great way for someone if they're going to be using head switches, just spending more time driving. It could be with a joystick or head switches, whatever access they use for mobility might be the same type of access for their communication. And it could just give them more practice with that motor pattern. And in the beginning, communication systems for some folks might start out as light tech. as we start to work and they can practice on that motor access piece, we don't want to have somebody wait to have perfect access before they can, access language. So in the beginning, they might have a light tech communication system while they're practicing the motor access piece. So making access practice fun in the beginning. Here's an app, CanTunes, that's made by the University of Victoria. Essentially, this pulls your music from your iTunes account and pulls each album, and there's different layouts. So here we've got 4 albums that are up. You can set it to have 2 albums, 4 albums, I think 6 or 12. So it's a great fun activity for someone to practice maybe their finger pointing. You could also add a key guard if that makes it easier. And this can also be switch adapted. So if someone's practicing their switch scanning, this could be a fun and errorless activity. There's lots of apps out there that are set up in a grid fashion. There's different ways you could set it up. Again, for someone to practice their finger pointing, these are all switch accessible as well. So just thinking about what the layout might look like and fun activities that you might program for somebody. So a little note about being a smart switch partner. In the beginning, so for this little guy, here's Weston, who you saw earlier with his twin brother and his mom and his communication device. This is when he was about 5 years old, before he had his own communication system all dialed in. We were helping him and his school team and his mom figure out where is the best place to mount switches. So in the beginning, we actually, during his assessment, just held the switches for him. He would get very frustrated with technology if people were futzing with mounts, and he didn't have much tolerance for things not working. So in the very beginning, we would play with Inclusive TLC, has some fun games on the computer, and we would just hold those switches for him just for a few minutes in the beginning, each time to figure out where is a good place. And after a while, we figured out his selector switch is by his hand, so we mounted that one, but we'd still hold the mover switch because it would sometimes go in his eye and he would get frustrated. So during this assessment period, we would hold the switches, and then over time it was clear where to mount them. So we were setting him up for success, kind of being that smart partner in the beginning, making it successful. And so he was having a positive experience with technology in the beginning. So this little guy here, Kenny, he's 18 months old, and the same thing for him. This, you'll see a video in a moment of Kenny during an assessment. He had used a hand switch before to turn on a toy with his therapist, and his mom and the therapist were wondering, how can Kenny access more things in his world and potentially augmentative communication? So in the beginning, rather than putting him in a chair and mounting switches, we just held them during the assessment so that we could be right there at the ready. So if he turned his head and went for a switch, it was in the right spot and it worked when he went there. And if he was maybe went into an 18R pattern or had some extraneous movements, we could move a switch away since we could tell, that wasn't something he was intending to do. So during that assessment period, it can be nice just to be flexible and being that smart partner. So in a moment, we'll see a video on Kenny. Little side note, if you're familiar with Linda Burkhart, she's done a lot around switch progression. So helping somebody move from a one switch kind of cause effect activity, quickly moving up to potentially 2 switch step scanning to use for communication. So she's got information online. We've also got handouts on how to help somebody move from one switch up to 2 switches with step scanning. And just a big side note here, someone doesn't have to pass one of these levels to move on to the next. It's a guideline, but you can kind of jump around and try some different levels here. So you don't have to master one to move on to the next. So we will see a video on Kenny. So we are at Oregon Health Sciences University. It's a teaching hospital. Our friends at OHSU and the USED, they had started an early access to assistive technology clinic. So we came in for their first assessment with Kenny and helped the therapist and the team kind of problem solve, how do we help Kenny advance his skills in a very short period of time. And just a reminder here, he's 18 months old. He had only used his hand for a switch before, and every time his therapist said he went to activate the switch, his head would drop. He has cerebral palsy and he has some cortical vision impairment. So we thought, let's start with some head switches and just see how he does. A head movement's very small. It helped him keep his head more upright. And you'll see kind of how he progresses through this video. Little side note, in the beginning, we asked Mom, what does Kenny love? What does he get excited about? And she said he loves her singing, and she actually had a song on her iPhone that she had recorded. We didn't have a switch interface with us, so we kind of fudged it a little bit. So we held a switch, and anytime Kenny activated the switch, we would tap the iPhone and it would play the song. So it was essentially a cause-effect activity using something very motivating that Kenny loved. So we will watch the video here.
Elmore, sing it. Get more right here. Are you singing? Yay. That was some good music. Yay. Nice. Yeah, that's nice. Morphin. Yeah. Oh, there's Fan. There's Fan. Oh my goodness. Nice. And let me know if he's Peter right now. Might be Peter. Maybe one little more. Oh, there you go. Oh, Fan.
I'll do one more.
So you can see little Kenny by the end, he was doing some pretty cool problem solving. He had to figure out which switch turned on which thing, the fan or the lights, and he picked it up really quickly. You can just see he's getting that motor pattern down. In a second, you'll see where Kenny is now and how this has kind of transitioned into communication for him. But in a short period of time, he picked this up. And again, we were smart partners in the beginning, just there at the ready. This is during that assessment period. You wouldn't be able to every day, have multiple people holding up switches. But in the beginning, he was having a very positive experience with technology. So he was excited to do more next time he was introduced to the switches and the activity. So over time, he is now able to have switches mounted on a chair for him. But in the beginning, it's nice just to set him up for success and have it work well for him each time. So here's Kenny now. He's about, I think, 3 years old in this picture. He has a light tech communication book that his therapists have made for him with large high contrast symbols since he has cortical vision impairment. And it's a partner assisted scanning book. So he's able to scan through the book using yes and no head switches. He doesn't have a verbal yes and no. And for him, he can't do the head nod right now because his head often hangs down because of his vision impairment. So he's able to have a yes and no on each side of his head with the switches. And when he leans to one side and activates it, he hears, yes or no. Over time, I'm confident that he could just have someone holding hands up there. And then potentially the hope is that maybe he would just on his own turn to one side for yes and turn to one side for no. He's also doing some powered mobility trials with his physical therapist with head switches. And so over time, those electronic switches in his power chair could be utilized to operate a communication device. So there's little Kenny. So just a recap. For access and practicing access, keeping it fun in the beginning, contextual learning, so it's very meaningful, setting someone up for success, what it means to be a smart partner, and really thinking about those fun, meaningful activities. And a little note at the bottom, we often say that the switch or interface is not the activity. The activity is the activity. So rather than saying, hit the switch or get the button, really focus on the activity of like, oh, let's play more music, or what happens next, and really focusing on that activity. So now we've got time, and we will open it up for questions, discussions, thoughts. I'd love to hear, and feel free to unmute yourself or type in the chat box, whatever works best for you. And we've got plenty of time here for any thoughts.
I'll jump in. This is Hannah. I do have one question. You've mentioned a few different things, including kind of that balance of fun and interest, and then also errorless learning. One thing that I've encountered with some of the clients I've worked with is they become very interested in that voice output of some of the switches that we're utilizing. Do you have any ideas or tips and tricks for how to ensure that there is still errorless learning that's happening, even though the client or the child might be really more interested in exploring how the voice output sounds when they access?
Yeah, and so when you talk about voice output, do you mean like potentially on the device itself, like what you have recorded?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, on the switch, like when they access that access point, that there is sound that it makes, and sometimes it seems like that sound is very motivating, but I'm not always sure that I'm getting that errorless learning happening as well.
And so for an example, you mean like maybe on the step-by-step recorded
Yeah.
a message, and so here's the step-by-step. So if you've recorded something, and so you're wondering, are they just really focused on what that is saying? So in that instance, and it could also be on a device, a lot of times people just keep going through and listening. Give the child an opportunity to just play with that device as much as they want in the beginning, and having a lot of exploration. It could be they're just trying to figure out, it might be exciting and they like what the message is, or they like that sound, but let them try it out as much as they'd like. And so for some folks, we even let them take home the technology, or just spend 10 minutes just playing and listening, because it could be they're just trying to figure it out in the beginning. And then once it's kind of like, okay, I know what these things say, I know what this does, then I can maybe be more engaged in you or my communication partner, because it's new for them. So does that sort of help?
Yes, yeah, it does. So just the process of even accessing that output is learning in and of itself.
Exactly, yeah. And some folks just need to try it a couple times and like, okay, I get it. And for one little gal, we sent home a loaner device, and mom said she went in her closet and sat in there for an hour and went through and hit every button about 100 times, and did that for 2 days, just nonstop. And she was like, is she ever going to do anything with this? And then after a couple days, she started to use it to communicate, and kind of got that out of her system, so to speak, and was familiar with what it is. And then she just needed that time on her own to explore it.
Great.
Great.
I'm not sure if you can see the chat box. We do have a question from a participant. Can you describe simple communication while determining access?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I don't see the chat box on my end. So you said describe, say it again.
Can you describe simple communication while determining access?
Ooh, good question. So next month and the month after, we'll talk a lot more. Oops, I think I paused my video. In the next 2 sessions, we'll talk a lot more about those components of communication. And so just to give you a little taster, you could include some language and communication in your access piece in the beginning, but keeping it more simple. So one example would be on one of the apps I showed, I have different animal sounds that are up, and obviously for a young child, animal sounds, or it could say, you know, it might have songs programmed, or there might be some simple language like in the trouble game where it said, you know, roll the dice, what, you know, what's next? I want blue. So you can have some kind of like low cognitive load language in the beginning when you're doing access, but really keeping that more complex language separate. And you'll see what that looks like. There's also a lot of participation activities in the beginning where someone can participate in an activity where there's not a whole language system. So I think it'll be clear in the next 2 sessions how we kind of layer on that language piece in the beginning with access. But in the very beginning, if someone's having a lot of trouble getting their body to work and activating the device and figuring out how it works, keeping that language piece, again, quite simple. It could be in a game, it could be a song. So I hope that helps answer that question, and you'll see more in the next 2 sessions as well. But that's a great question.
Mm-hmm. And we've got 2 more questions that are coming in on the chat box. I'll kind of summarize them for you. I'm also going to add in, we have a quick evaluation link for this presentation today. So it will be anonymous. We want everyone to complete the link for the survey, and then you'll need to access it if you want CME or CEU. I'm going to summarize these questions for you, Carrie. The first one, it's a 10-year-old patient with CP, cortical vision impairments, and not using verbal communication. They've used switches and other forms of access, and he likes to use his feet. It sounds like the family is really good at anticipating his needs, and so there's not a lot of opportunities for him to request. So the question is, are there recommendations to help the family understand the value of increasing those initiations and having him access the things that he wants?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's very common. You know, families are great at understanding and knowing their child, and it's so wonderful that they have that ability to communicate with each other in ways that somebody who doesn't know the child wouldn't be able to interpret. But it's wonderful they have that. So helping families understand that. For their child to have more people in their world, in their social circles is so important. And so respecting the communication that they might have with their child, but over time, developing friends, being able to communicate with teachers, going to the grocery store and being able to communicate with someone else is so important. And in order for other people to communicate with this child, they need to practice using these tools early on. So if that helps, that's usually where we would start in, you know, getting that buy-in, because in the beginning it might, why the family would say, why use these tools? We don't need them. And absolutely it could be that some of these tools aren't needed at home very much, and that's just fine. They might have their communication strategies set up for home, and that's just fine. But if the family can understand that this child has the right to relationships in life, and in order to communicate with others, they might need to use tools and to practice them. And it might just be at home they don't really need them, but maybe a little bit at home they're willing to practice them maybe once a day for a couple minutes, so that over time they can communicate with other people.
I like the emphasis on kind of expanding their communication circle too. We'll probably have time for one last question. Someone who is working in the 0 to 3 population, and they're wondering about when to start working on head nodding or shaking. Are there any prerequisite skills that kids need to have before that, such as the ability to make a choice, or is that a good way to, focusing on that skill is a good way to help them learn how to make choices?
That's an excellent question. So what we do in the beginning is always model whatever it is that we would like the child to do. So I even have a video clip that I've shared with teachers and other professionals of just me using the head switches myself. And so in the beginning, it would just be modeling. And so really exaggerating your movements. So you might make some choices yourself and say, you know what? I am so hungry. I want to get a snack. Let's see. I could have an orange. I could have yogurt. I could have crackers, or I could have something else. Let's see. What do I want? Do I want an orange? No, I don't like oranges. And then, kind of go through. So that modeling in the beginning so that the child can see what it is that we're eventually asking them to do. But I think that's an excellent question. And you could start that at any age, even, with a 1-year-old. If you have a child who has what you suspect will be a complex body, and you suspect that communication is going to be a challenge, the earlier that we can model that, scanning through those choices, the better. And so that's an excellent question. So start with that modeling. And then once you've done some modeling for a while, and then it might be kind of working up to showing them, over here, this side means no, yuck, I don't like that. And down here means yay, I like it. And then just starting to shape that over time.
Wonderful. And we have a few more questions, but I'm mindful of our time. Would it be okay for participants to email you with questions? I know you have contact information to share with us.
Yes, absolutely. So let me move to the next slide here. So here is our contact information. I do see someone has a question about Kenny, and that's an excellent question. So yes, feel free to email me, atlab@cvision. We've also got a website. You can give us a call, and we do have, we're an education resource center, so we have free call, email line. So you can, anywhere in the country, in the world, you can call and email us with questions, and we're happy to answer if we can. And if we don't know the answer, we'll connect you with someone who does. So
wonderful. And as a reminder too, this is just part 1 of our 3-part webinar series. So please join us April 9th and May 14th. We'll be continuing this conversation. Please share. We've recorded this webinar. We'll have it on our USAID website. The link is also live to register for those next 2 webinars that we are offering. And thank you all for your time this morning. Thank you, Carrie, for your time. This has been really valuable information. I look forward to learning more with all of you in our next webinars next month.
So I'll go ahead and stop my share because I think you have a slide. And thank you, Hannah.
Yes, here we are. So it's just those dates and a reminder to please register. All right, thank you all so much for joining us this morning. Have a wonderful weekend.